Cool. So how's everything over there?
No complaints, man. We're just rocking and rolling here. We're getting ready to come up on an all-star break. We're about halfway through, a little over halfway through. But I appreciate you reaching out and asking me to join you this morning. I never turned down an opportunity to talk shop, and I don't know, I love this stuff, man. So again, I appreciate your willingness to reach out and ask me on your show.
No, I appreciate you for your time, man. Really love it. I did a lot of podcasts with speed coaches or basketball performance coaches, but not really a lot with baseball. So really trying to reach out to the strength coaches who work with baseball. But anyway, first of all, can you introduce yourself for the coaches in Taiwan?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Logan Jones. I am in my 5th season with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I have worked with both our major league and minor league players. I'm currently assigned to our AA affiliate, which is in Amarillo, Texas. I have a collegiate background. I did a couple of collegiate internships, one at the University of Kentucky, one at Wake Forest University, working with a variety of sports, basketball, baseball, softball, women's soccer, men's soccer, the list goes on and on. So I feel like I have a pretty good awareness around performance in general, and maybe some similarities and differences across different types of training environments and working with male versus female athletes and so on. So yeah, year 5 with the Diamondbacks now. Professional baseball is certainly a different animal. Baseball in general, given the demand of the sport itself, but definitely our environment of working in professional baseball provides some unique challenges that are hard to match elsewhere.
Cool. Since I didn't have a lot of chance talk with baseball strength coaches, can you describe how was the schedule in the major league for game to game and in season, off season?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I alluded to, I think the demand of the sport itself is unique, but especially our I would say the environment, right? So our scheduling, we play almost every day. We have more off days mixed in now than ever before, but still we're hitting the field 6 days a week at a minimum. So that's unique in its own way. Travel is not always ideal. There are depending upon the level that you work, there are long bus trips, overnight bus trips. There could be cross-country flights, changing time zones, staying in different hotels. Some have better setups than others. So it makes it difficult to have control over dietary habits at times, sleep habits. So a lot of these things that we try to preach and provide a good example for our players, a lot of those things are unique challenges for sure to our environment. So at the major league level, we're playing 162 game schedule, which is a lot of games. And even at the minor league level, we're looking at somewhere between 132 to 144, 146, depending upon the level. So no matter how you spin it, we're pretty busy. We're showing up to the ballpark each day, and so we have to be very aware of workload and things that habits and things that our guys are doing away from the field, because those can help kind of guide our decision making when we do come to the ballpark, and making sure that our players are ready to go as close to 100% each night at 7:00.
So is the 162 games is did you add the playoff or not?
No, so 162 games is the regular season. So you're looking at, really, to be honest, between spring training, the regular season, and then if you're fortunate enough to play in the postseason, you're looking at upwards of 200 games. And that would be considered an in-season phase, right? So obviously, if that's the case, we have a good recovery period following the season, and we encourage guys taking a step away and taking some downtime, away from training, away from the skill aspect of baseball. So anywhere from anywhere from like, I'd say spring training included, anywhere from 160 to 200 games, depending upon the level of competition. And obviously that looks much different than your typical collegiate baseball schedule or like your high school schedule. So like we have guys that are getting drafted out of the high school ranks, out of the collegiate ranks. We're signing international guys that really, haven't had that experience previously. And now we're asking them to up their workload and all that kind of stuff. So a big part of our job is education and really, laying these things out for them, these foundational concepts that we try to hammer home to give them the best chance to number one, stay healthy. That if you're not on the field, it's tough to have a significant impact on the ball club. But then also like, perform at whatever their optimal peak performance may be.
Cool. Since it's like 162 to like 200 games, and like we were just mentioning, basically have the player basically have to like play like every night, right? So how do you like put in some training, like maybe like strength training or like maybe just ice or that kind of stuff into your season?
That's a great question. I'd say, our training looks different, right? Like we don't necessarily follow a linear model, that you may see in an off season type environment. We don't necessarily follow a percentage-based program. I would say this is an oversimplification for sure, but depending upon the position that guys play, like we try to follow a high-low model to some extent, especially take a pitcher, for example, who's not playing every day, right? So it's a starting pitcher, like say he's on a 5-day routine. We're trying to basically make his high days high and his low days low, like promote recovery on the days where he doesn't have to perform. And then when it's time to go to work, it's time to go to work. So like we'll stack lifts and more of an intensive conditioning aspects and arm care, oftentimes on a work day. And then we'll take these other days that are fillers and promote, program conditioning and movement mobility type stuff, recovery modalities, to promote a regeneration, getting towards that parasympathetic state that's going to promote recovery. So it's going to look different position player to pitcher for sure. And I'd say that like we have to be aware of workload, as I mentioned before, of like, is a guy playing every day? Is a position player playing 30 straight games, 40 straight games? And if so, like where are the areas that we can supplement his on-field work? Like maybe it means that our lifting that week looks a little more on the recovery end of the spectrum than a work end of the spectrum, or maybe it means we push hydration, or maybe it means that we really emphasize getting enough sleep. And basically we're looking to supplement the things that a guy may be doing on the field in our training environment. Because that's really the only chance that we have to be successful playing the long game, looking at the season as a whole. We're not necessarily worried about this week or next week. We're worried about having guys at their best in August and September, when the games matter a lot for postseason fate and stuff like that. So probably not as I don't know, black and white or direct of an answer as maybe you're looking for, but I think that there's a lot of gray area in this environment. And I think that there's probably many ways to achieve the same outcome. And it looks different for each guy too. So I think that's kind of what makes my job unique and enjoyable, is what works for one guy is not going to work for another. So how can we find some common ground? How can we give and take a little bit, trial and error a little bit to figure out what works best for each guy.
How many players are in a team for like the major league?
Yeah, so we have a 26-man active roster. So that's like players that show up to the ballpark each day. So that's 26. Generally, it's about half and half position player and pitcher. So it might be 13-13, it might be 14-12, whatever. And then depending upon the level in the minor leagues, the AAA level has 33 players. In part because we're coming off of COVID and have guys more readily available if something were to happen from a COVID or a workload standpoint, try to reduce or mitigate the risk of injury by having more bodies. And then as you kind of move down, like in double A here, we have a 28-man active roster. But there's a constant transaction, like guys moving up, guys moving down, guys coming from Arizona, going to our affiliates, guys going from our minor league spring training facility in a rehab type environment off to an affiliate. There's a lot of transactional type things that happen. So the roster size, I would say, is like actually pretty large, like larger than it's historically been. And that's, I think, in part because of COVID, but then also with that understanding, having more bodies in theory, if managed properly, can help reduce the risk of injury.
Man, like that's a large number for like if you want to like really like individualize your training. It's hard, man.
Yeah, you're right. You're so right. I think it's challenging because like I touched on before, like looking at a player, like trying to see like what is this player's makeup, strengths, weaknesses, what are my access to resources. Okay, I'm gonna put together the best plan for this guy. But then you realize that you have 25 other people that you have to do the same thing for. and maybe there's only one strength coach. Maybe in some environments there's two strength coaches. But like even at the major league level, like very rarely do you have more than two strength guys or girls that are working with a 26, 28 man roster, right? So even if you break that down half and half, like if you have a guy that works with a pitcher or pitchers and someone that works with the hitters, you're still looking at 12 or 13 people that you're trying to construct these general plans for, but then also like what are the needs of each guy and what are some deficiencies mechanically, because baseball is a highly skilled endeavor. So like what are things that we can do from our standpoint, from a general qualities of strength and stability, mobility, et cetera, speed, but then also like how do these things tie into the skill of throwing a baseball or swinging a bat, for example.
Cool. So since it's like before I talk to you, I think like the schedule in NBA is crazy, but the baseball schedule is like crazier. So how to like monitor fatigue for like in baseball? I know when I talk to like basketball strength coaches, we often use like reactive strength index or like counter movement jump, that kind of stuff. How about you guys?
Yeah, so this is I've gotten this question before. Excuse me. I've gotten this question before, and I think that it looks different in our environment. And I'll say that like there are different ways of doing this. There are 30 Major League Baseball organizations, and there's 30 different ways of like trying to monitor workload and like readiness, and I don't know that anyone has a perfect system. I know that we're all in the process of trying to basically develop our own system that works best for us. So to be completely honest with you, a lot of it is subjective feedback, which kind of sucks because you don't really know if someone has a good like feel for their own body and what they need, and you don't know if they're being truthful. And I think that brings up the importance of building relationships and communication with your athletes and with staff, because I think once you have that relationship built and the guy knows that you care about him as a person, like yes, he is an employee of our organization and we're trying to win the baseball game tonight, but like, hey man, I actually care about you. Like outside of baseball, I want you to be successful. I want you to find like prosper in these different areas of your life. And I want to basically provide some framework or some guidance for you to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. I think that that's kind of the foundational piece, because I think that then when we ask for subjective feedback on, hey man, like you look a little tired, or your family's in town, or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever is in town, like it's kind of like, hey, like we understand there's probably some level of stress outside of being at the ballpark as well. And this is already a high stress, like results-based industry. Like if you don't get out there and perform, you may lose your job, you may let the team down. The list goes on and on. So I think that there's a lot of self-imposed like stress. So to be honest with you, like our organization in particular, like a lot of our stuff is subjective feedback. So we do have access to force plates and such, where we can get some objective data to like kind of pair up with that. Guys will wear tech, a whoop strap or an Oura ring that kind of help maybe provide some like objective data to pair with that subjective feeling or bits of information that we can get. But given the demand and structure of our season, it's really, really difficult to gauge that and then make a decision based on that. Like we're not going to say, hey man, your HRV numbers were down, so like I'm going to the manager and I'm telling him that you can't play tonight. Like that's not going to happen. So I think that like hearing what people say, cueing them into what they feel from their body, what is normal for them, and then we create this structure, this plan that is basically going to be best for that guy moving forward. So again, unfortunately, there's a lot of gray area, not as black and white as maybe I would like. I'm a black and white guy. I like to like have it very structured and very laid out. I want to have a plan that works. But unfortunately, like there's a lot of trial and error. We make some mistakes. We learn from those mistakes, and then we try not to allow them to happen again.
Cool. So next thing I want to talk about is like the common injury you see in baseball. Like what are the like top 3?
Yeah. So sorry, repeat that again. It broke up a little bit.
I mean, what are the top 3 like common injury you see in like baseball player, and how to deal with that?
Yeah. That's a good one. So, I mean, playing the sport of baseball is like inherently risky in itself. Like that's already we're talking a high velocity, rotational component of the sport, no matter what you're doing. Sprint speeds are at a high velocity as well. And so I think already like by nature, like baseball is already a high risk sport, right? It's not a contact sport, but like from the actions that you're performing, the skill component of it is high risk, especially throwing a baseball at 90 plus miles an hour repeatedly, like maybe upwards of 100, 125 times in a game, for example. High risk movement. So I think that the most common is probably some kind of shoulder, elbow. I think that to some degree, like unfortunately, you're gonna see shoulder and elbow stuff no matter what you do. That's the truth. Now, is there some leeway to like reduce or mitigate the risk of injury and provide like smarter training modalities and a quality arm care program and have some kind of idea of posture and position and kind of how you're moving through space and stuff like that to try to mitigate the risk of that of a cuff or of a UCL, Tommy John? Absolutely. Like we take those steps and we try to put our best effort forth in doing that. And we've had a great deal of success. But I would say if you're looking at it, one of the most common injuries, it's going to be for sure shoulder, elbow stuff. We do see some oblique things pop up, being a rotational, component to the sport of baseball. And then we'll see some lower extremity stuff. So we're looking at like some hamstrings, some adductors. I lost my lights here.
Okay.
We're looking at lower extremity stuff, hamstrings, adductors, stuff like that. But again, we can try to mitigate some of the risk of these types of soft tissue injury through proper warm-up routines, through a thorough education of, hey, posture and position is important. Muscles are attached to bone. And if your structure is this way versus that way, like maybe you're in a more advantageous position to rotate. Maybe you're in a more advantageous to sprint at a high velocity. And then in theory, we can reduce the risk of a soft tissue injury and just allow, like I said, like some degree of injury is going to happen. It's a high risk environment, high risk movement. but where are areas that we can try to like mitigate or reduce that risk? So I would say those three things: shoulder, elbow, oblique, because of the rotational component of baseball, and then some degree of lower extremity, hammy, adductor. Every now and then we'll see a quad pop up.
Cool. So, you brought up like the shoulder and the elbow. So, I noticed that there's gonna be a lot of like foreign pitcher go to the state and had to go through like Tommy John surgery, right? So from your standpoint, is there a way to like let's say prevent it, or like let them get like stronger for their elbow?
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah, you know, I don't like the I don't know that we can prevent anything. You know, the simplistic answer is I don't know that I don't like the term like injury prevention, honestly, because like I don't know that, like, I think there's way too many variables at play for us to claim that we're preventing an injury. I do like the idea that we can likely reduce the risk if we're smart in our training modalities, if we program effectively, if we have a good grasp of things that are going on outside of like the actual performance environment. What's going on at home? Are they leaving the ballpark and are they going to the gym on their own outside of our guidance or outside of our supervision? What are their like life habits? Do they drink a lot? You know, are they eating fast food? Those types of things. So I think that we have some level of control, and but within that, I don't think that we necessarily can like prevent that type of stuff. But I think that we gauge workload on a acute to chronic workload scale. Basically, we have data analytics people that have developed this acute to chronic system that basically tracks. We'll take a pitcher, for example. We track their warm-up throws. We track their mound throws in a bullpen type environment. We track their game pitches. There's also a metric that gauges like leverage of pitch. So like how stressful is the pitch? Is it a pitch in the first inning with no runners on? Is it a pitch in the seventh inning with the bases loaded in a full count? Like those two types of pitches may be weighted differently from a fatigue, from a stress standpoint. For example, bullpen pitches are not weighted as heavily as game pitches in the calculation, just because we as an organization don't believe that that stress on the body is the same in those two types of environments. So I would say that the use of technology and the use of like systems such as an acute to chronic model help give us some objective like guidelines. Now, I don't think that it makes decisions for us. I think it serves as a reference point for us to say, hey, when we're talking about mitigating or reducing the risk of injury, we can reference this number. Maybe the computer spits out a number that says, hey, we're looking at somewhere between 75 and 82 pitches for our starting pitcher today. Yes, we're trying to live within that framework. However, we're not going to negate or neglect the human component, the human element of pitching or of the sport of baseball. So I think that there's all these different variables at play. However, we do have systems that kind of help guide us in our decision making. But to claim that we can like eliminate the risk of injury, like I don't. It's my own opinion that that's not possible. Like we're throwing a baseball at 100 miles an hour. We're breaking off spin. Like we're throwing these different things, and we're asking guys to throw off the mound. You know, as a starting pitcher, you're throwing once every 5 days in game, and then you have a bullpen, right? If you're a relief guy, maybe you throw back-to-back days. So I think to claim that we can basically like get rid of the risk, I don't think that's accurate. But I think that an intelligent and an educated strength coach can probably serve as a piece of the puzzle and lowering or mitigating that risk.
True. So I want to talk about like rotation, because like baseball has like, no matter it's like the pitcher or you have to swing the bat, it's rotation. So when it comes to like rotation, how do you like train the rotational power? and how to like maintain it during the season?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a difficult question because I think that as a strength coach in a working in an environment, a rotational sport, we talk a lot about rotation and how often these guys are asked to like spin, right? And in a lot of cases, like their structure, like their build isn't like advantageous to be able to rotate. Like we have like some guys that are broad shoulders, wide rib cage, like pelvis that's like externally rotated, and it's very difficult to rotate efficiently at a high velocity, stay healthy, etc. So I know in baseball we talk a lot about like anti-rotation. We talk about building the brakes and bracing and stabilizing in a way that, because we rotate so much, so we need to be able to counteract that, right? We have to be able to slow down the high velocity that we're creating, and it's my belief that your body's only going to allow you to speed up as much as you can slow down. Otherwise, you would blow an oblique, or you would injure yourself. So I think that like a good core program where we're working on pressurization and we're working on decelerating and bracing and there are many different variables that go into that. Like that's probably a conversation just in itself. That's probably a podcast in itself. But to keep it simplistic, like I think that so much time is spent on that, and it's very, very, very important. I want to make that clear. It's very important. However, you need to be able to train rotating efficiently as well. Like you have to train like, what is rotation? What does that look like? What does it look like from a lower half standpoint? What does it look like from a rib cage standpoint? What are different influencing variables that go into rotation? And we certainly do our fair share of rotation at a low velocity to try to like train more efficient movement patterns. Obviously we speed that up through med ball drills. We have aqua ball, like the water bags, the water balls. We use that stuff to help try to train more efficient rotational movement patterns. Again, that's a health thing, but then it's also a performance thing as well. Because the amount of impact or force that you can provide into the baseball is directly tied to your movement efficiency, your ability to put on the brakes, decel into like contact, right? And then your ability to slow down what you just sped up. So in terms of like an objective figure to gauge rotational power, we don't use much of that in season. I think a lot of it is like coaching eye, looking and seeing how guys show up on a day-to-day, having an infrastructure, a framework that goes into, hey, these are our baseline things. We're going to work on core pressurization. We're going to work on posture and position. We're going to get strong in good positions, stable in good positions. And then we're going to learn to move through space, holding those good postures, those good shapes. Because if guys can't hold the posture, the shape through space as they're moving through a high velocity component, I would argue that increases the risk of an injury. For example, if the head and the neck, if the ribs, if the hips aren't like moving efficiently through space as one unit, then all of a sudden now we have an issue that like guy has an increased rate of injury, and then a guy may be out for 6 or 8 weeks with an oblique that was maybe avoidable, or that we could reduce the chance of injury there through different means as part of our warm up before a cage routine or before an on-field BP, for example.
Cool. So, since they have like a lot of rotation, I believe that there's going to be a lot of like asymmetry, right? So how would you deal with like asymmetry?
Yeah, so there's a great deal of asymmetry. There's no doubt about it. Like I think without diving too deep into this, just in general, like human body is asymmetrical already in itself. Like from like your internal organs are not positioned from a symmetrical standpoint. Your diaphragm is not symmetrical. So, respiratory patterns kind of, breathing patterns kind of drive all aspects of human posture and performance. I would say it drives posture, and then posture has an influence on performance. So I think that the touching on the posture and position, I think that stuff is key, because I think that that's kind of like a groundwork, a framework in which we operate. So I think also to touch on the asymmetry, like you on top of the already being asymmetrical, now the demand of the sport, the rotational aspect of baseball, most guys throw or hit from one side, right? So that's not advantageous from a injury standpoint. You have one side of the body that's in theory much stronger, much more efficient, much more stable than the other. So I think that what we look to do, like, so to some degree, that's normal. Like that's going to be a normal occurrence in our environment. So we're not going to necessarily try to make someone symmetrical. We're not going to throw like 100 med balls from the left side because I swing 100 times from the right. Like that's not what we're chasing after. We don't have the time to do that. We don't have the resources to do that. I think that would probably be a little bit of a misguided practice. But instead, we're just basically implementing a sound foundational warm-up, strength program, mobility, movement, basically that can help fill in the gaps where someone may be at risk or someone may be lacking, if that makes sense. So because we understand that there is asymmetry present in our sport, someone may be better at getting into one hip than the other hip. They may be better at rotating from one side than the other. That may influence their sprint performance. Maybe one stride length is longer than the other because their hips are more internally rotated on the right side than the left, et cetera. The list goes on and on. But basically, we're using corrective exercise as part of our warm-up to try to get people in a little bit better position that, again, is going to lead to optimal performance and staying healthy and out on the field. But then from there, we're just implementing a sound foundational strength and conditioning program that's moving in all three planes. We're training on one leg a lot. We're training with one arm a lot. I would say we utilize unilateral training far more than bilateral training. The sport of baseball is played on one leg with one arm for the most part. It's just a different, like we touched on when we first started, different environment, but like the actual demand of the sport itself too, playing at such a high frequency presents just hellacious challenges. And it basically that those challenges help guide our programming. And basically, I would say we have more of a conservative approach than not. Like, we want to be proactive, not reactive. We're going to do foundational things, the basics really, really, really well. We're going to make sure that guys can hinge, that guys can move in the frontal plane efficiently, that they can rotate, move in the transverse plane at a high degree of efficiency. And then from there, we kind of get more specific with each individual based upon like what their individual needs may be. I don't know if that's what you were looking for or not.
Yeah. So it's more like keeping them healthy and try to let them have a like longer career instead of like pushing the power outputs.
I would say that we have at least an equal distribution of both, if that makes sense. I think that we realize as a sports medicine and performance team, I work as part of a team with strength coaches, athletic trainers, physical therapists, team dietitian, mental skills people, and then we have our clinical, like our team doctors and stuff. So I think that as a team, yes, we are responsible for enhancing human performance, absolutely, but not at the cost, not at the expense of keeping our our players, our guys on the field, our liability or our guys on the field basically is the most simplistic way I can put it. Like we're committed to enhancing human performance. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Unfortunately, because of the demand and because of the structure of our environment, it's very difficult to have an objective approach to in-season training. Now, off-season training like that looks much different. Like there's no doubt about it. Like our methods are different in the off-season. Our principles are similar, but as we move throughout the course of a season into the off-season, into a preseason, into a spring training, like these things look a little different. But I would think your evaluation of, yes, like our first priority is to just do no harm, right? Like at all costs, if we do nothing else, we have to not get in the way. and then from there, now we look to put our best effort forth in helping our players, our guys, out there every night. We're trying to win every night with the ultimate goal of winning World Series at the major league level.
Cool. So that's kind of like all the question for like performance side of things. The next thing I want to talk about is like, there's like 4 really popular sports like in the state, like football, basketball, baseball, and like hockey, right? Mm-hmm. And I believe that baseball is the most like they have like the most foreign athletes come to play baseball in the state, right? So they have like different training background, like different culture. So how to like try to like have like a great relationship with like these athletes and like at the same time lead them to train.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I understand your question first before I answer. So basically you're wondering how do we walk the line of having our guys perform at their peak state, but the problem is these players come from all different types of backgrounds and all different types of environments. Is that kind of along the lines?
Yeah. Sorry about my English.
No, you're good, man. I want to make sure that I have an understanding before I waste your time.
No.
Okay, so no, that's a good question. Yeah, so I would say we're unique in the sense of we have an international draft, which is what it sounds like. We're getting players from outside of the United States at oftentimes young ages, as young as 15, 16 years old. We have an academy, an international academy down in the Dominican Republic, where oftentimes a lot of these international signs start their careers. They go down there. They are exposed to the foundational concepts of what we do as a department, what we do as an organization, what the expectations are. And that's kind of the first step for those international guys. And then we have a domestic draft. Like we have a draft that's here in the United States. It primarily is your high school, your collegiate. There may be a few Puerto Rican U.S. territory selections somewhere in there, but for the most part, it's high school and college age kids that are taken in the domestic draft. And so basically in any given year, we're acquiring 30, 40, maybe 50 players that are, hopefully like the goal is to help us win at some level. And ideally one day that we're shaping big leaguers that are helping us win at the major league level. So I would say that the challenge of teaching a 15 or 16-year-old Latin individual that doesn't speak a lick of English, and then taking your 4-year college guy who has a very high training age, knows exactly what he's doing in the weight room, has a good feel for just what his workload and what his capabilities are on the field, and taking those 2 different individuals in the same environment and trying to create a plan, very difficult. One doesn't speak the same language, one does. 2 different training ages, maybe someone who can't hardly do a push-up, and then we have a guy who is over here that is, that's a very high training age. So I think that finding common ground with each individual is probably a good place to start. I think earlier I talked about building relationships and the importance of effective communication. I think that's still going to be prominent here. I think that ultimately, as a strength and conditioning coach in professional baseball, I'm tasked with helping every guy to my best ability. Doesn't matter what background is, doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter what your role is on the team, doesn't matter if I like you, it doesn't matter if you like me. We have a professional obligation to help each guy get as close to reaching whatever potential they have here in our environment, and have an obligation to the organization, right, to also create winning players, foster a winning environment, a healthy clubhouse dynamic, and communicate effectively with not only our players but with staff. So I think it's an integrated approach. It takes many different members of the staff contributing efforts towards that individual, and sometimes that might mean that we have someone who speaks Spanish translate a message. Sometimes it means that I hopped out on the ground and I actually demonstrate an exercise as opposed to cueing an exercise. Whereas take a 4-year collegiate draft pick, like I'm probably not having to spend too much time worrying about the communication aspect of it. Now I'm worrying about like how effective I can be, at what rate of development can this guy improve, and then also how is our environment going to be much different than what your environment was in college, because we see that a lot too. Individuals think that they can come from a 55 game regular season at the collegiate level and 160 game regular season at the professional level and train the exact same way. And obviously it doesn't work that way, right? Like you're increasing at the rate of games at a 300% clip. And then also you're playing every single day. In college, you're playing maybe 3 or 4 times a week. So you just have a lot more leeway, a lot of time to recover in the collegiate race, where maybe you don't have that in professional baseball. It's a very good question. I'm not sure that I have a great answer for you. I just think that I for the most part, I'm trying to provide a framework, provide some context around the environment, so that way people can understand maybe some of the things that go into what happens when a 15-year-old Spanish speaker shows up first time in the United States versus someone who was born and raised in the United States, cultural differences, language differences, age difference, training age difference, the list goes on and on. How, as a person that works for this environment, that works for this organization, how am I going to show up my best self in helping each guy? That's the kind of art of the job that I'm tasked with here.
Cool. Appreciate it, man. Love it. So that's kind of like all the question I have for you today. So if there's like coaches or like athletic trainer, therapists are interested in what we are talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I think social media is good. I'm pretty active on social media, both on Twitter and Instagram. The handle there is at Logan_Jones 95. I'm also available. You can reach me via email at ljones@dbacks.com. I really do appreciate you reaching out to me. This is probably one of my favorite things to do, for sure, is meet new people, talk with like-minded individuals, even if working in different environments, to collaborate and at the end of the day, like, we're all pulling the rope in the same direction. We all have a similar task of taking a group of people, doesn't matter what the dynamic is, and helping them achieve whatever goals they have for themselves. I think that's kind of what coaching is in general. Is I definitely think it's an art. I think that there's no correct way, there's no right way, there's no one way to do anything, and strength and conditioning and coaching and being a person of influence. So I think that anytime I have an opportunity to talk with individuals like yourself, I welcome that. That's one of my favorite things to do professionally outside of coaching. Our players is talk shop with other strength coaches, other coaches, people in different disciplines. So I welcome anyone that has any questions, any feedback for me, any suggestions for me. Like I'm all ears with that type of stuff. So I just really appreciate you reaching out to me and for your time and asking me on this morning.
No, I appreciate you. To be honest, I was like trying to like, because in Taiwan, baseball is a big sport here. And I know there's like a lot of coaches gonna say that training strength and conditioning is strength and conditioning. There's not gonna be a lot of different in like training baseball player, basketball player, or that kind of stuff. So I'm like literally trying to figure out what should I like be asking for a performance coach who works in like performance professional baseball team. And to be honest, I literally like listened to like most of the podcasts you did. It's interesting, really love it. And since you said that we love this, probably we can schedule like a second episode or like third one.
Yeah, man, for sure. Like I appreciate you listening to some of my other podcasts. That's one of my favorite things to do. Like anytime anyone asks, like I always welcome this opportunity. I see it as a chance to put my head together with someone else and talk shop and for sure, like I learn just as much from others as I try to influence other people too. I think it's a two-way street. So absolutely, man. Like if you want to set up a part 2, then absolutely. I'm all for that. You just let me know when.
Appreciate it.